Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to go way beyond your typical productivity hacks. We're going to break down this incredible mental model that asks you to see your life, well, as one single engineering project, one designed to generate pretty much infinite personal energy.
So let's just start with a really fundamental question about how you live your life. Think about your day-to-day. Are you just consuming energy? Like a battery that's slowly draining down to zero? Or are you actively harnessing the world around you to actually generate more energy than you use?
And that brings us to the core idea here, the biological nuclear power plant. What this model does, and I think this is brilliant, is it asks you to stop looking at things like your health, your finances, your mindset as all these separate little boxes. Instead, you see them as what they really are, interconnected parts of one single super complex system, and that system is you.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to start at the most fundamental level you can imagine, the actual physics that builds your reality and forms the foundation of your personal power plant. Now, look, these aren't just some abstract concepts from a physics textbook, right? The very same forces that build stars are at work inside you. Think about it. Gravity is that constant resistance you're always pushing against, and that's what literally builds your physical strength. And electromagnetism? That's the language of your nervous system, the current running through your wires. You are, quite literally, built from the universe's raw materials.
So here's the big takeaway from all this physics stuff. You are not just a guest in the universe, okay? You're a direct product of its fundamental laws. You're this tiny, localized pocket of order fighting back against a universe that loves chaos. Okay, so that's the big picture physics. But how does all that universal energy translate into the individual reactor that is you? How do you actually process all this stuff?
Well, first up, you've got your hardware. Just think of your physical body, your health, as the actual physical machinery of your power plant. It's the reactor core. And it's pretty simple, right? If your hardware is run down, if you're sick or exhausted, the whole plant just runs inefficiently. It can't process that energy from the universe effectively.
But of course, what good is amazing hardware without some killer software to run it? That's where wisdom comes in. Your knowledge, your mindset, your emotional IQ. That's the operating system. That's the code that tells all that raw energy where to go, directing it into useful work instead of just letting it burn off as wasted heat. Things like stress, anger, or pointless conflict.
And here's where it gets really cool. These two things, hardware and software, they work together in this beautiful synergy. When you get both of them optimized, your health and your wisdom, you create a system that's basically self-charging. A system that actually generates more energy than it uses up.
Okay, but of course, your personal power plant isn't just sitting there in a vacuum, right? To be truly powerful, it's got to connect to the wider world, to what you could call the superorganism of society, and that's the grid. Now, this is a really powerful way to reframe how you think about money. See, in this model, money isn't the end goal, not at all. Instead, money and wealth are like your capacitors. They're basically batteries where you store all the extra energy you generated yesterday. And what do you use that stored power for? To buy back your time today, freeing yourself from the constant pull of just trying to survive. And you use that freedom to plug into the grid of society. Society is what provides the infrastructure, all the systems of trust, currency, and law that lets you take your own little individual spark of energy and multiply it into something massive. You can achieve so much more when you're connected to the grid than you ever could on your own.
So the transaction here is actually pretty simple. You trade your internal energy, that's your health and wisdom combined, for what we can call social energy, which is money. And why do you do that? To gain optionality. And optionality is really just a fancy word for freedom. All right, let's step into the control room. How do you actually run this incredibly complex system every single day without, it overheating and having a complete meltdown? This is where we get to reframe things we usually call negative emotions. They're not punishments, they're not bad. They're just data. They're sensor readings on your dashboard. Think of it this way. Fear, that's your radar. It's pointing you to where the power is, both the risks and the opportunities. Pain, that's your feedback loop, signaling that something in your system needs an update. Patience is your buffer. It stops you from crashing when things get delayed. And kairos, that's the Greek concept of the perfect moment. It's your synchronization, knowing when to act. It's all just data for you to use. Now, it's also absolutely crucial to understand the two main ways your system just leaks power. First, you've got lust, and I mean that in a broad sense, a desire for anything. It acts like a short circuit, dumping all your energy into one massive, intense spike that just burns out the wires. Then you've got worry. Worry is like a slow leak, a constant hiss of escaping steam that does absolutely no useful work, but man, it will drain your reserves dry.
And if you look through this engineering lens, even ancient ideas like the 7 deadly sins start to look less like moral failings and more like, well, diagnoses of system inefficiency. Pride? That's not a moral problem. It's a firewall that's blocking essential data from coming in. Envy? That's just you redirecting your processing power to focus on someone else's system instead of your own. So virtue, in this model, isn't really about being good. It's about being an efficient engineer.
Okay, so let's put this all together. How do we take this whole theory and turn it into an actual, practical, daily operating protocol? Something that can flip the switch and turn you from an energy consumer into a true energy generator.
Okay, here it is. Here's the daily blueprint. Think of your morning as the startup sequence. You optimize your hardware, your health, and you set your daily goals with your software, your wisdom. Midday is when you plug into the grid. You go to work, using that feeling of fear as a compass to guide you toward generating wealth, that's stored energy. Throughout the day, it's all about maintenance. You use patience to handle friction and delays, and you're always on the lookout for kairos, that perfect moment to make your move. And then, in the evening, it's the cooling down phase. You plug the energy leaks caused by worry, and you analyze any pain points from the day so you can plan your software updates for tomorrow.
And you know what? This brings us full circle, right back to that original choice. So which system are you running? Honestly, most people are running the battery model. They're slowly leaking energy, day by day, just trying to survive. But the alternative is to become a generator, to actively harness the fundamental forces of the fricking universe and produce way more power than it takes just to live.
And when you make that shift, when you really adopt this mindset, something profound happens. It completely changes your relationship with reality itself. You stop being just a passive guest, getting pushed around by forces you don't understand. You become an active participant. You become the engineer. You become the architect of your own power plant. So, the only question left is, what are you going to build?